Today, we're going to pick up the end of Andrew Jackson's presidency. It's really over by this point in our notes. And I've already given you the answers right here. So if you haven't done your journal yet, here they are. You can go ahead and copy these down. If you actually listen to the lectures, you get your journal for free today. So we'll go back. Give you a few seconds there to make sure you could pause it and copy them. All right, today we're talking about the rise of the Whigs. The Whigs basically were a group of people in our country who were against Andrew Jackson. To put it blatantly, or put it simply, they felt like he had too much power. They felt like he was using the presidency more like what we talked about as a king. But basic definition I'd give to you, I wanted to actually pull it up and give it to you. Just a political party active in the 19th century. It was one of the two major political parties during this time. So that's kind of your simple version. Zachary Taylor, who ended up being president, as well as William Henry Harrison, Daniel Webster, and Henry Clay were all part of the Whigs, or some of the major figures. Daniel Webster, who we haven't talked about yet, very, very active. I believe he was a senator at one point, and then he was Secretary of State at one point. So very, very involved in politics. Also wrote the dictionary. So the Whigs had some very powerful people. Is kind of my point there. They thought that Jackson was a bully. Okay, if you think about tariffs, the issue of secession, that he was going to hang anybody who breathed the word of secession. The National Bank, Indian Removal Act, all those things are things that were going on. With Jackson. The leader of the Whigs Party was Henry Clay. Obviously, he did not win his bid for president, but he was still a very powerful political figure for years to come. We've talked about Henry Clay in various roles. I actually was trying to figure it out the other day what his role was after he left the office of, or trying to run for president, left the office of Secretary of State. But he was Speaker of the House there before, and then he was a representative afterwards. So he continued his political career. He was still involved. It wasn't like he just got out of politics completely. So, anyways, if you remember Henry Clay, sorry guys, my brain's still trying to function right now. Henry Clay was the leader of the Whig Party, but if you think about some of the issues that he had with Jackson, it's no wonder that he was against Jackson's presidency. Number one, he had kind of undermined him with the corrupt bargain. Then in the bank deal, he tried to convince Biddleman to go against Jackson with the bank. He also had to step in and kind of be the compromise guy with the tariffs. He's had a lot of issues with Andrew Jackson over the years. Now, Henry Clay did run against Jackson in 1832. Jackson had reversed his opinion on rotation of office, basically saying that, he felt like you should step out after 2 terms, which he would do. There was also a third party that ran during this time, the Anti-Masonic Party. They feared that the secret organization, the Masons, which Jackson was a part of, was, and many of other presidents, was kind of like a secret organization around the country, so to speak. There's just this whole idea that something like bad's going on in the presidency, especially with as powerful as Jackson was becoming. But because of this, the anti-Masonic vote gained half of that anti-Jackson vote and actually killed Henry Clay's election bid. So another thing going on during this time is Andrew Jackson issues what we know as the specie circular, which is just kind of hard currency. In order to buy land, you had to buy it in gold and silver. You could not buy it on paper money. And what this was doing is trying to stop speculation. So essentially, these banks were paying money that they speculated how much it was worth, or how much they had, or how much they were going to have, and there was no actual physical currency going with it. And honestly, guys, the easiest thing to tell you is that specie circular is just land had to be bought on hard currency. Don't get hung up in currency. I can tell you personally, I have studied it quite a bit, and it's very complicated. It's more complicated than it needs to be. The simple version is gold and silver. So that kind of gives you an idea of what we're talking about there. Martin Van Buren, he was president from 1837 to 1841. He won the next election. He was a Democrat and the first president who had been born under the American flag. So everybody else had been born during the Revolution or prior to America being America. One of his nicknames was Old Kinderhook, which led to the American expression "okay." And he was very okay as a president, mainly because he was forced to clean up many of Jackson's mess. If you remember, he had to enforce the Indian Removal Act. You also had the country from a economic side was struggling a little bit here and there. And then in 1837, the economy basically collapses overnight because some banks refused to accept paper money. Unemployment, businesses failed, banks failed, etc. And funny enough, guys, this is something that would be good for you to go read about, especially with all the stuff going on in our country right now. Go read about some of these panics that have happened over the last, 200 years of our existence as a country. It's amazing how often these financial panics happen in our country, where something bad happens and there's a quick economic depression and people lose their jobs. And I mean, for who knows how long, it's just bad. And then all of a sudden the economy kind of fixes itself and people are back to doing business and everything's fine again. But just something to think about there. In 1840, the Whigs did finally win the election. The Democrats were blamed for the depression that had taken place in 37. The economy was starting to recover, but it was still blamed on the Democrats that it happened in the first place. William Henry Harrison, if you remember, fought in Indiana during the War of 1812 at the Battle of Tippecanoe. That was his nickname, Old Tippecanoe. And they were able to outdo the Democrats in campaigning with catchy slogans, etc. Okay, so they kind of, same approach Jackson had took to the election, William Henry Harrison took in this one. The problem was that William Henry Harrison did not make a smart decision. We're going to skip on to this slide. William Henry Harrison won, and then he stood out in the rain and spoke for over 2 hours. Because of this, he actually caught pneumonia and died 31 days later. So he was president for the equivalent of a month and then died because he'd caught pneumonia. Now, the stinky thing for Whigs is that John Tyler, his VP, was actually very much like Jackson. He was from the South. He had many of those democratic values like Jackson and Van Buren had. Even though he was considered a Whig, he was really more of a Democrat than a Whig. But he was picked because they thought that it would pull some voters from the South, which they were correct. It did. The problem is they ended up with basically a Democrat in office anyways. He was a big supporter of states' rights, did value the office of the presidency. He did have some good things that the Whigs wanted, but not every characteristic was good for what the Whigs were pushing for. So here's your 3 questions. Make sure you're answering those, guys. Make sure you're keeping up with those. Most of you have been doing a better job with that. Thank you. Hopefully you're working hard. And if you have any questions about any of this stuff, please let me know. Here are your 3 vocab words, and that is all for today, guys. So quick day of notes. Just want to get through this, so kind of let you value your time. As far as work for the rest of the week, make sure you guys are keeping up with assignments. Trying to balance out, how much I'm giving you guys, trying to give you time to work, trying to give you things to get through. Don't worry about this slide. I know this was at the end. I had picked up a whole set of notes that I was going to do after this and then never finished them and just decided not to add them because I thought it was too much. So don't worry about that. You are done after this slide. So hope everything is good with your families. Hope all of you are doing well, and hopefully maybe get to see some of you soon. If not soon, like the end of May, maybe next semester we'll be back at high school and go back to normal, and we'll be done with all this online stuff. But anyways, hope you're having a good week, and talk to you soon.